Paul and Jeffrey, welcome to THN's Road to Grimmfest. We're here to talk about The Other. Firstly, congratulations on getting into Grimmfest. How are you feeling about the selection?
I'm
Paul.
feeling the what? I'm sorry. For
No,
this.
she said, yeah, how are we feeling about? Yeah, no,
Oh,
I'm
good. Yeah, I know. I'm excited. I had intended to come over, but I my schedule here got completely scuttled, so I'm having to miss it. I'm disappointed about that, but I wrote the festival when I had to decline and said I'm so curious to see how this film lands outside of the United States. Because for me, it is, it feels somewhat specific to, some things that are going on in our own country. I mean, I'm sure that it's, on a lot of levels, people can enjoy it outside of the United States, but there's some, some of the deeper levels I feel are specific. So I'm curious to see how it lands. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm just excited because I always I think that Europe appreciates art more than than we do here. Just in general, with arts programs
Yes.
and taking acting seriously and the art seriously. So, I was very excited and proud of the film and the work that Paul did, and I was like, yes, they have good taste over there. So I was
Yes.
very excited.
Nice. And how did the idea come together, and how did you guys come to work together?
The idea came from a nightmare I had in my mid 20s about being a new father with an infant that was uncontrollable, just a little, rabid little thing. And it made an impression on me that I've kind of harbored the idea for the screenplay for a long time. Um, and Jeffrey and I have been friends for 20 years now, 20 years. Ever since we were seated next to each other at a horror convention, or brunch or something like that. I don't remember.
I think it's Saturn Awards we met.
Saturn Awards or
Yeah, but it was still,
yeah.
instant
I mean,
bonding.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, literally we talk almost every day. And for an hour about, oh, I woke up, I had my breakfast, brushed my teeth, that kind of thing.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've known Paul. I mean, since he did his first film, Hellbent, like I was a fan of his before I met him. So when I met him, that's why I got really excited when I met him. I was like, oh my God, you did Hellbent. And so we have, he's just a great, talented filmmaker but also just a great friend. And so we've always wanted to find something to work on together. And this opportunity presented itself. And, it was a personal story for him. And I related to a lot of the themes of it, as well. The difficulty of adopting children and especially if there's a racial component, dealing with that aspect of it or not dealing with it. And yeah, I just thought it was a really, really great script. And we were fortunate to hook up with some producers who were really great and supportive, which is rare. So just we all got to support Paul's vision. Um, so yeah.
It's interesting when you describe what you walk away with when from the script or the movie, that it's about the adoptions and all of that, because for me it's a very different thing.
Yeah.
You know, but we come from different backgrounds, we have different baggage that we bring. But yeah, I'm glad that it resonates with you in a different way.
Yeah.
Uh, as opposed to me just being like crazy white lady.
I mean, so often stories featuring children, tend to be about, the female, about the mother character, placing them into the spotlight. But here it's very much the foster father who is
Mhm.
involved in kind of trying to figure out what's happening and, look out for this child. What was it about that dynamic that you guys liked?
Well, I mean, part of it is out of necessity because, because of the idea behind the film of, the twin trying to, and I can do spoilers and all that here, right? I can. Yeah, okay. Um, it was pretty important for the mother to be the adversary, the principal adversary, because she is protecting this horrible fetus that she's carrying periodically. So it really left the father to be um, sort of the stand-in for the audience, and the buddy character for Cathelia, the young girl who is mute. So we needed, an adult to be a participant in order for them to drive around, um, and also sort of her voice, um, in order to relay some of that information. And you know, I uh, I liked the idea that in the script originally, Robin, the who is the mother, was a woman in her 40s, who had been unable to have children. And her partner, Daniel, the husband, was actually the same age. He was 30. I mean, I liked the dynamic of a much younger man, um, with an older woman, because I felt like their stages of life would have added something to it. But it was very, very challenging to cast Robin. And we ended up going with someone who was the same age as Daniel, the actor. But I liked the idea when I wrote the script of having this young man who hadn't ever really needed to step up into adulthood yet. He was a little bit kept. He played with children as his work and all of that, so he knew how to communicate. But becoming the guardian and the parent, and learning how to nurture on that level, I thought was going to be a really interesting journey for him, and one that I'm sure I've seen it somewhere, but it's not typical.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Long-winded answer. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine, it's fine. But it's always, mother and child. So it is always interesting, when there are those, few cases where they do, show that, men can care about kids too, guys.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not exclusively a woman thing. So it
Yeah,
is
and
always
that's what
wonderful.
was interesting to me because Paul mentioned baggage, and I didn't realize, but just because of my own life situation, like I had a little resentment against my father, and I realized that was spilling over into a lot of my scripts where it's like the father was not around or the father was, and certainly as I've grown older and I've seen how you know that, like you said, that dynamic is always assumed, which I think does just a huge disservice to the great men out there who are
Yeah.
stepping up and being fathers. And so that actually struck me differently with Paul because he was coming more from a place of that nightmare where he didn't know what he was doing and
Yeah.
couldn't be a father. And on my end, it was like, oh, this is really sweet, and that dad that I wish that I had, except for
Right.
drilling me in the head.
Yeah.
But I had also matured enough in my own world to like kind of read so much into like just seeing that representation on screen of a father, even though he doesn't know exactly what he's doing,
He's
really
trying.
struggling. He's trying so hard and he loves his child so deeply that, he will do whatever it takes to save her. So that was really lovely to see in a genre film.
And that was a very important component in this particular story, that we see the father, really bonding and loving this young girl as a daughter who is not his daughter. I needed to see that because the mother's the absolute opposite. Even from the very beginning, before anything starts going down, she says things that indicate she is already pre-programmed to not bond properly, that this is, almost an ornament, in her life. So,
Yeah. And I mean, looking through his credits, Dylan has worked quite a lot within genre.
mhm.
What was it about him and his skill set that he was able to bring to this character?
Interesting. Um, I looked at a number of auditions, and he was one of the audition scenes uh, could be taken in a couple of different ways. A very angry, authoritative approach, which every single other actor took. And then Dylan took the scene like he does in the film as really trying to create attachment and building a bridge of understanding with, his problematic charge. It was the scene where Cathelia has tied up Robin, and Dylan's like, "What are you doing? We've got to figure this out. You've got to be better." And then every other actor came in with the audition of like yelling and demeaning and punishing, and Dylan, naturally, without any direction from me, his inclination was to, I have to reach this child. And I'm like, that's perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was great.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Evangeline as Cordelia, this is it's a non-verbal character. She's very young. It's a very
Mhm.
intense character. I mean, how did you guys, how did you find her and then, work with her? Because, it's an incredible performance for somebody so young.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we lucked out, honestly. I was terrified when we were casting because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never worked with children. What have I done? I've got a special needs actress that I'm going to be working with and a child, and I don't know necessarily how that's going to go. Both of them were amazing. Yeah, she was, Evangeline is very much a child off screen. I mean, she plays her, she's jumping in the pool constantly, very much a child. But as soon as we were preparing for a scene, she would say, "Tell me once what I'm going to be doing," and I'd say, "You walk over here," and then you listen to him and all that. And it was like a photographic memory, honestly. I mean, she already knew everything she had to do, but she just wanted to make sure that she's going to hit her marks. And then she would bring it. Suddenly she was this intense and very standoffish character initially, but then she starts letting that crack when she sees that Daniel's actually going to, support her and be useful and love her. Anyway, she was amazing. She really was.
And I mean, obviously the film also has, being a horror film, it has its fair share of practical effects and gore and things. How did that all work? Because like you say, there's drilling, there's all sorts of ickiness going on.
Yeah. Um, I I'm a proponent for practical effects, especially at this budget level. I mean, we are indie. We are a squarely indie movie. And I think that practical effects, even if they don't totally work, just the fact that they are practical and there and real, they have some kind of presence, as opposed to I didn't feel comfortable shipping out shots to some sort of VFX company to do computer animation that I had no control over it. I mean, what if it didn't read right? At least with practical, I felt like we knew what we had. There are some digital effects, wire removal, nothing particularly, you know, uh, challenging. So I felt okay with that. Um, but yeah, we had a bunch of dummies and blood and watermelons and bellies full of red juice. It was pretty down and dirty a lot of the time.
Yeah. It's fun on set though when you're watching like Paul direct and you're watching the drill going and you're seeing it through the monitor. You're like, yes. So there is something just very visceral,
Yeah, yeah,
and just fun. I mean, we grew up reading Fangoria and just reading effects. So um, as much practical as we can do, we love. But there is that giddy thrill of like looking at the monitor and seeing a shot and it working and then because everybody's like, all right, we've only got like 5 more minutes. We got to get this shot in.
yeah.
And then there's that magical take where it works and you're just like, everybody's so excited. So, it was a lot of fun.
And you've both had kind of a long history with horror. What is it about this genre that you both enjoy working with?
You can start on that one.
What's I've just, I've said how much Nightmare on Elm Street influenced me, but I've just always loved that with this genre, you can tell so many different types of stories. Um, and it's not, sometimes you can just write something that's just fun and gory and bloody. Um, but sometimes you can do that, but also tell another story. Like that's like with this story, there was a universal emotional place that Paul was coming from when he wrote it. There was I knew where he was coming from, but when I read it, I took something completely different from the film. And I just love the fact that you can scare people, but also say something else or get something else across. So many times, and I'm sure Paul does too. It's like we're always like defending the genre. It's like people are like, "Why do you watch that?" And they don't see the value in horror. And I always talk about how like for me, horror helped me get through a lot of this stuff that I was having to deal with growing up, like in deep rural America back in the 70s and 80s. It was not a fun time to be a person of color or gay. And really, the horror, me and my buddies bonding over horror films, like really was a safe space for me to like let a lot of that negativity out. And so I talk about when we go to conventions and we meet the fans, they're like always so nice. And the horror community is like really one of the most like loving, accepting, loyal fan bases out there. And people that when you go to a place that's not horror, they're like, we were expecting you to be a little more or a lot more creepy. Or you must be crazy. You must have some dark stuff in your head. And I'm like, yeah, I got most of it out
Yeah.
through watching film. So that's what I love about the genre.
I think that horror is such a huge umbrella, and a lot can squeeze under it. And for me, um, I think that you can discuss topics that are hot button, are challenging, are upsetting in such a way that people will listen in horror because it is, you've got the kind of distraction on top, that this is just a sort of a visceral experience. But then underneath, you can layer in, it's like, hey, this other stuff is going on, and maybe that will resonate on some level in people and, build empathy. That's what a lot of what horror is for me is building empathy for characters who are, outside the standard, Hollywood rom-com.
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey, I can't have you here and not mention, Final Destination. Obviously, this year we got a brand new installment. How does it feel, seeing, something that you created, all those years ago is still, continuing to thrive and entertain, generation after generation.
You know what? I'm very proud and also just grateful. Like it's the fans have been so amazing, and what I love about the Final Destination franchise in particular, we've had like a very consistent in Craig Perry, you've had a very consistent, producer from the first film who's just such a champion. And then the people that have like, especially Bloodlines, like I met with the writers before they started the script and they were fans and the directors were fans. And so now you have people working on the franchise, even though it makes me feel a little old. But you have people working on the films that grew up loving these films. So they bring that love, and I think it was so apparent in Bloodlines, just the level of detail, like just all the callbacks and Easter eggs and things like that. So everybody came at this like we have to do this right as fans. Um, and so Bloodlines I just loved how that one turned out. Laurie Evans Taylor is working on the new one, and I've talked to Craig about the story, and the story's just again, it's kind of like another Bloodlines where it's like a really clever way to do a Final Destination movie, so it's still a Final Destination movie, but doesn't feel like it's just rehashing the formula. So it's just really exciting. I get log truck, so many log truck memes, so many, but I love
Uh,
it. I love it.
every week, every week.
Oh yeah, it's like, but I love it, and again, just growing up as a fan myself, working at the studio that made New Nightmare on Elm Street, which is my favorite film, like I'm just very grateful that we got lucky to have such a supportive group working on the films, and again, just the fans, obviously, um, for being there. And this was that like the most, I mean, by far the most successful Final Destination. But I think that's also it's because the fans showed up and it had been a while, but it's also because of all the love that the writers and directors and everybody, all the cast was like, oh my God, we get to die in a Final Destination movie. It's just like, it's just cool. It's a lot of good energy and fun and respect. So couldn't be happier.
Yeah. Okay, go back to the other, for my final question, why do you each hope that, people take a chance on this film?
Why do we hope they take a chance on it?
Yeah.
Well, we made it for y'all.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I for several reasons, again, like I just adore Paul as a person and a filmmaker, but I think we really need to support. You hear this all the time, but we really need to support indie film because we get the studio IPs, the franchises, and the sequels, and the based off books and video games, and now people are making movies based off Reddit threads. That's kind of the world we live in now, is like this risk averse business world. So I really try to see every indie horror film that comes out, regardless of what it's about, because the more we support that, the more filmmakers will be able to do that. Everybody's like, why doesn't Hollywood have any ideas? And it's like, well, movies aren't really coming out of Hollywood as much anymore. Like there's other states that are putting out films, and luckily local filmmakers all over the world can make films now, which is great with equipment not being as expensive. But we just have to support these people. We have to support the people that are making these indie films, because yeah, it just encourages people to make more. And so that's, besides it being a really good film, and me being proud of it, and again, just proud of the work that Paul did and that our whole team did. I think supporting it to support indie film is important.
Yeah. I mean, why do I want people to see it? I mean, I think along the same lines, you're I think that horror, especially, there's a lot that's personal that gets strained out when it goes through the Hollywood studio system. So independent horror is, I think, more visceral, more personal, has more teeth. Not this in particular, in the sense of I don't think it's scary. I think it's a fun thrill ride. It was always intended to be just a fun thrill ride. Um, but I do think that, under the layers, if people, decide to think beyond just the narrative, I think that there are discussions to be had. Um, I don't like to put too fine a point on it because just even, between Jeffrey and myself, we walk away with different things. And I love that. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that people watch it and have a great time at the very least. Know that it is supposed to be funny. Um, and I hope they get more out of it at some point.
It's a good film too. I forgot to even say that, but yeah, it's actually it's a real it's like I said, I'm proud of it, but it's because it turned out really well. Like for what we were trying to do, like
Yeah.
as an indie film, I think
Yeah.
the found family, we had kid actors, we had
Yeah.
birds, we had did all the stuff you're not supposed to do in indie films,
We
right at the
stick the
start of it.
landing. We stick the
Yeah,
landing, and then we don't.
yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, it is a great film. I wish you both, the best of luck with the screening at Grimmfest. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Kat.
your time. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.